Welcome to another episode of My Weird Prompts, an AI-generated podcast featuring the random prompts of Daniel Rosehill as answered by a revolving cast of friendly AI characters. Join us for deep dives into AI, technology, and whatever other random thing Daniel finds fascinating today. Subscribe on Spotify or your favorite podcatcher. Now, today's episode.
This episode was generated using artificial intelligence. Please verify facts.
Hey, Herman and Corin. We've talked about smart homes on a number of episodes, and I'd love to talk about one radio networking application we actually haven't really delved a lot into. We talked about Zigbee, Matter, and these devices, particularly which of these is going to be where the consolidation is going to be, and we talked about LoRa as well in terms of its capabilities in alarming in particular. The kind of unloved radio network in smart homes is probably, it's fair to say, Bluetooth. It's possible to get a Bluetooth long-range adapter. In fact, I have one that claims to be able to reach up to 150 meters, which sounds kind of extraordinary to me. I'm just looking across the street and thinking, does that mean I could literally stream music to an apartment across the street? I mean, I'm assuming it wouldn't work, but who knows? Maybe it does. The technology we have today is crazy. One thing, I haven't done much with it, but I have been able to do the integration, like stick in the dongle, and if you're running your Home Assistant through Proxmox, you can use pass-through, and Home Assistant will be able to actually see the Bluetooth transmitter receiver, and you'll be able to do things with it. Now that's where I've kind of stopped, because I don't exactly know how to take it beyond that. Usually in Bluetooth, when we talk, we have to pair the Bluetooth device, usually put the Bluetooth device into a pairing mode, get that pairing going on. And I'm assuming there are transmitters that actually maybe have a physical screen, or there's an app for this, because I guess doing it at the software level would be much more logical. But how does that work, firstly, Herman and Corin? If you wanted to persistently pair a Bluetooth speaker with Home Assistant, can that work? By which I mean, could you actually have a persistent pair set up reliably that it's connected and there's never going to be drop-offs? And how many devices could you connect? Now, the reason I'm actually thinking that I wanted to ask this question was not actually about home audio. It was about losing stuff. So many of us have one of those gadgets, the tiles in our wallet to find our things, and they're great tech, but they can get kind of pricey if you have a few of them. And what if you had 10 objects? I record this as I look in vain for my industrial label printer, and I was thinking, wow, it'd be good to put a little find this device on that gizmo. I came across on AliExpress before Bluetooth beacons, BLE beacons, Bluetooth Low Energy. And I bought it thinking I'm going to try it out at some point. I put in the battery and just forgot about it. So it was literally sitting in a box for 2 years. And I was amazed to see that it was actually, when I stuck in my Bluetooth transmitter to the Home Assistant, it found a device. And I was like, no, I've got no Bluetooth devices, but it found so it was running for this entire time, and I'm not sure if it actually has a ping, like a physical sound thing like the tile devices do. But this was like a $3 thing. I didn't expect it to actually work as well as it seems to have. So this actually seems like a pretty viable system if you're someone who might misplace an awful lot of things around their house. Can you actually integrate a number of these and have them all connected to that central transmitter? And what about if you did want a true tile replacement without wanting to have to buy components and program the thing? Is there anything that's actually intended for this use? Because when we're talking about Bluetooth finders, we're not really talking about quite the same thing as tiles and Find My devices, which are intended they work on cellular and they work on a distributed mesh of sorts. I'm talking quite specifically limitedly about using Bluetooth trackers for misplacing things around the house. Bluetooth is clearly not going to get past that perimeter. So Herman and Corin, is this possible? And what are some things you can do by integrating Bluetooth into your smart home?
Hey everyone, welcome back to my weird prompts. I am Corn, and I am here in our Jerusalem living room with my brother. It is a bit of a chilly evening outside, and these thick stone walls are doing their usual job of keeping the heat in. But man, they really do a number on our Wi-Fi signal.
Herman Poppleberry at your service. And you are not kidding about the walls, Corn. Living in a house that is essentially a fortress is great for security, but it is a nightmare for a smart home enthusiast. It is a beautiful day, though, to talk about some very specific, very nerdy home automation. We are going to be diving deep into the radio waves today.
It really is. And honestly, today is a bit of a special one because we are diving into a topic that I think a lot of people overlook or, frankly, get frustrated with and give up on. We have spent a lot of time on this show talking about the big players in smart home networking. We have done deep dives into Zigbee and how it handles mesh networking. We have talked about the massive promise of Matter and Thread, and we have even explored the long-range capabilities of LoRa for things like mailbox sensors and garden monitors way out by the olive trees.
Right. Those are the darlings of the smart home world right now. They are built for low power, mesh networking, or extreme distance. They are the purpose-built tools. Bluetooth, on the other hand, often feels like the messy middle child. We use it every single day for our headphones and our car stereos. But in the smart home context, it is often seen as a bit of a backup or a secondary protocol. People think of it as something that is just for pairing a phone, not for building a robust infrastructure.
Exactly. But Daniel's prompt today is actually pushing us to look at Bluetooth through a completely different lens. He's not just asking how to connect a speaker, he is asking how to make Bluetooth a core pillar of his Home Assistant setup. He is specifically asking about integrating Bluetooth into Home Assistant, focusing on two very different use cases. One is high-quality, persistent audio, and the other is low-cost asset tracking using those cheap little Bluetooth low-energy beacons you can find for just a few dollars on sites like AliExpress.
I love this prompt because it highlights the incredible versatility of Bluetooth. It is one of the few protocols that can handle both a high bandwidth, synchronous audio stream, and a tiny, infrequent, asynchronous burst of data from a battery-powered sensor, but doing both reliably in a central hub like Home Assistant. That is where things get really interesting, and where a lot of people hit a brick wall.
It really does. So, let's start with the first part of Daniel's question. He mentioned he has got a long-range Bluetooth adapter plugged into his Home Assistant setup. He is likely talking about one of those Class 1 industrial adapters with the big high-gain antennas. He is trying to figure out how to persistently and reliably pair a speaker. You have messed around with Bluetooth audio in Linux environments more than anyone I know, especially back when we were trying to get that multi-room sync working in the old apartment. Why is this such a headache compared to just pairing your phone to a speaker?
Oh man, it is a classic case of what looks simple on the surface being incredibly complex underneath. When you pair your phone to a speaker, there is a very sophisticated, invisible handshaking process happening. Your phone's operating system, iOS or Android, is constantly managing the connection, the audio codec negotiation, and the reconnection logic if you walk out of range. It is optimized for that one-to-one relationship. In a Home Assistant environment, you are usually dealing with a Linux backend, often running in a container or a virtual machine, and it does not have those quality of life features enabled by default.
Right, and Daniel mentioned he is using Proxmox with pass-through. For the listeners who might not know, Proxmox is a hypervisor that lets you run multiple operating systems on one physical machine. Pass-through means he is telling the physical computer to give that specific USB Bluetooth dongle directly to the Home Assistant virtual machine, bypassing the host layer.
Exactly. And while that solves the hardware access problem, the software side is still tricky. Home Assistant is primarily designed to be a conductor of an orchestra, not the instrument itself. It wants to tell other devices what to do via APIs. Playing audio directly from the Home Assistant host via Bluetooth requires a stable interaction between the Bluetooth stack, which is usually BlueZ in Linux, and the audio server. In the past, that was Pulse Audio, but these days, most modern setups, including the latest Home Assistant OS versions as of February 26, have moved toward PipeWire.
So, if Daniel wants that connection to be persistent, what is the secret sauce? Because we have all had that experience where a Bluetooth device just drops, and then you have to go into settings and click connect again. That is not a smart home, that is a chore.
The key is moving away from the idea of manual pairing and moving toward a managed service. In Home Assistant, the best way to do this now is through the official Bluetooth integration combined with something like the media player entity. But for true persistence, you often need to look at the underlying hardware behavior. If you are running Home Assistant OS, it has gotten much better at auto-reconnecting to known Bluetooth audio syncs. However, the biggest hurdle is actually the speaker itself, not the software.
That is a huge point. Most consumer Bluetooth speakers are designed to turn off if they don't hear music for 10 or 15 minutes to save battery. For a smart home setup, you need a speaker that stays in a constant standby mode or is always powered via a wall outlet. If the speaker goes to sleep, the Bluetooth radio turns off, and the handshake is broken. Once that happens, the Linux host might stop trying to look for it to save its own resources.
Exactly. So Daniel needs to ensure his speaker is always on. If he has that, he can use automation logic in Home Assistant. You can actually create a script or an automation that monitors the state of that media player entity. If the state moves to unavailable or disconnected, you can trigger a service call to attempt a reconnect every 60 seconds until it is back. It is a bit of a brute force way to ensure persistence, but it works.
And that is where those long-range adapters come in. Daniel mentioned his claims to reach 150 meters. Now, we should probably put a little asterisk on that mentally. Those numbers are usually line of sight in a vacuum, or maybe in a flat desert. In a house with stone walls like ours here in Jerusalem, or even a standard American home with drywall and studs, you are lucky to get 20 or 30 meters reliably. But a high-gain antenna on a USB adapter makes a massive difference in the link budget.
It really does. It reduces the packet loss that causes audio stuttering. Stuttering is the #1 reason people give up on Bluetooth audio in these setups. If the signal is weak, the bitrate drops, the buffer empties, and your announcement about the laundry being done sounds like a robot having a stroke. A Class 1 adapter with a 9 decibel isotropic antenna can punch through a few more walls and keep that bitrate high enough for clear audio.
So, how many devices can he actually connect? Daniel asked about the limit. I remember hearing back in the day that Bluetooth had a limit of 7 devices. Is that still a thing in 26?
That is one of those yes and no answers that drives people crazy. In the classic Bluetooth world, which is what audio uses, a single radio can technically maintain a piconet with one master and up to 7 active slaves. But in practice, especially when you are talking about high bandwidth things like audio, you are going to hit a performance wall way before you hit 7 devices.
Because they are all fighting for the same airtime on the 2.4 GHz spectrum, right?
Exactly. Each audio stream is a constant, heavy flow of data. If you try to run 3 or 4 Bluetooth speakers off one single USB dongle, you are going to get massive interference, lag, and drops. The radio has to rapidly hop between frequencies and time, slice its attention between all those speakers. It is like trying to juggle 4 chainsaws while riding a unicycle. You might be able to do it for a second, but eventually something is going to drop.
However, for Bluetooth Low Energy, or BLE, which is what the second part of Daniel's prompt is about, the limits are much, much higher.
Right, so let's pivot to the beacons. Daniel mentioned he found these BLE beacons on AliExpress for like $3. He is looking for a Tile or AirTag alternative. This is fascinating to me because Tile and AirTag rely on these massive Find My networks of millions of phones, but Daniel is talking about a localized private system. How does that actually work inside a house without a billion iPhones helping out?
This is where Bluetooth actually shines in a smart home, and it is a totally different mechanism than the audio we just talked about. These cheap BLE beacons don't pair. In the traditional sense, they don't form a persistent two-way bond. Instead, they advertise. Every few seconds, or even every few 100 milliseconds, the beacon just screams out a little packet of data, a broadcast that says, "Hey, I am beacon number 5, and here is my battery level and my current status." It doesn't care if anyone is listening. It just broadcasts, and then goes back to sleep to save power.
So you don't have to go through that annoying pairing process for every single tracker? You don't have to enter a PIN or wait for a handshake?
Exactly. Your central transmitter, or in this case, it is acting as a receiver, just sits there in passive scanning mode and listens. It picks up these advertisements and says, "Oh, I see beacon number 5. The signal strength is negative 60 decibels. That signal strength, or RSSI, received signal strength indicator, is the key to everything Daniel wants to do."
Okay, so if I have my central Home Assistant hub with that long-range adapter Daniel mentioned, it can see all these beacons around the house. But Daniel asked if multiple beacons can be integrated into a central transmitter. I think he might be wondering if he needs a bunch of receivers, or if one can handle it.
One good receiver can handle dozens, even hundreds of BLE beacons, because the data packets are so small and infrequent. It is like the difference between trying to listen to 10 people singing different songs at the top of their lungs, which is the audio problem, versus listening for 10 people occasionally clicking a pen in a quiet room. You can track a lot of pens.
But wait, if he only has one central receiver, he only knows if the beacon is somewhere in the house, right? He won't know if his label printer is in the kitchen or the basement. He just knows it is within range of the server.
Precisely. That is the limitation of a single central antenna. You get presence, but not location. If Daniel wants to actually find things, like his label printer or his keys, he needs a distributed system. And this is where the Home Assistant community has really done some amazing work over the last few years. Herman, have you looked into ESPON Bluetooth proxies lately?
Oh, I am obsessed with them. This is the real game changer for Bluetooth and the smart home. Instead of relying on one expensive long-range dongle plugged into your server in the basement, you scatter a few ESP32 microcontrollers around your house. They cost about $5 each, sometimes less if you buy them in bulk. You flash them with ESPFOM, and you check a single box in the configuration that says Bluetooth proxy.
And then they act like remote ears for Home Assistant?
Exactly. They pick up the BLE advertisements from the beacons in their immediate vicinity and send that data over your Wi-Fi back to Home Assistant. Now, Home Assistant doesn't just see that the beacon exists, it sees that the beacon is strong in the living room, weak in the kitchen, and non-existent in the bedroom.
Oh, that is brilliant. So you are basically building your own internal GPS using signal strength.
Exactly. There is a specific integration for Home Assistant called Bermuda. It is designed specifically for this room-level tracking. It takes the data from all your different Bluetooth proxies and uses the signal strength to estimate the distance of each beacon from each proxy. It uses some clever math triangulation or trilateration to tell you which room a device is in. It is not quite centimeter accurate like the ultra-wideband chips in the newest iPhones, but for finding a label printer, it is perfect. It will tell you it's in the office, probably under a pile of papers.
I love that. And Daniel mentioned the cost factor. $3 for a beacon versus $25 or $30 for a tile or an AirTag. If you want to track 10 items, your keys, your wallet, your cat, your label printer, your toolbox, that is a $30 project versus a $300 project.
And there is no subscription, no cloud required. No one at Apple or Google knows where your label printer is. It all stays local on your network. But there is a trade-off that Daniel should be aware of. Those $3 beacons usually have a much shorter battery life than an AirTag because they aren't as optimized. An AirTag can last a year on a coin cell. These cheap ones might only last 3 to 6 months, depending on how often they broadcast. And most importantly, they don't usually have a speaker.
Ah, right. That is a big one. When I can't find my keys, the first thing I do is open the app and make them beep. If these cheap beacons don't have a buzzer, how do you actually find the item once you know it is in the room?
That is the catch. Some of the slightly more expensive ones, maybe $5 or $6, do have a tiny piezo buzzer you can trigger. But that requires a two-way connection, which is more complex than just listening to advertisements. If he sticks with the absolute cheapest ones, he is basically playing a game of hot or cold, using his phone or a dashboard in Home Assistant that shows the signal strength getting stronger as he walks around.
It's like a high-tech version of a metal detector. I can imagine Daniel walking around the house with his phone, watching a gauge move from far to near.
It's surprisingly effective once you get used to the lag. But let's talk about the systems intended for this that Daniel asked about. Beyond just the DIY ESPOM approach, there are some more out-of-the-box solutions. Have you heard of Room Assistant?
I have. That is a standalone software, right? You run it on small computers like a Raspberry Pi Zero W or even a Pi 4.
Exactly. Room Assistant is a bit more heavy-duty than a simple ESPA home proxy. It runs on a full Linux stack on a Pi and can do very sophisticated room-level tracking not just of beacons, but of your phone, your watch, even your smart scale. It integrates beautifully with Home Assistant via MQTT. It can even track your position based on the Bluetooth signal from your smartwatch to turn on lights as you enter a room.
So if Daniel really wants to go deep on this, he could put a Pi Zero in every room. But given the current price and availability of Pi Zeros compared to the abundance of ESP32 chips, the ESP32 proxy route seems way more practical for most people in 26.
I agree. The ESP32 route is the modern way to do it, especially since Home Assistant now supports Bluetooth roaming. If Daniel has his Bluetooth speaker paired to his Home Assistant and he has these proxies around the house, the speaker connection can actually, in some cases, be handed off between proxies.
Wait, really? Like a cellular network handing off a call between towers?
Sort of. It is still a bit experimental for high bandwidth audio because the handover needs to be incredibly fast to avoid a gap in the music, but for things like Bluetooth sensors or low bandwidth devices, it is rock solid. If you have a Bluetooth temperature sensor in your fridge, it doesn't have to reach the central server. It just has to reach the nearest $5 proxy.
That completely changes the range conversation. Suddenly, that 150-meter range Daniel was worried about doesn't matter as much because you are just building a web of listeners. You are not trying to reach one single point. You are trying to reach the mesh of proxies.
Exactly. You are moving from a hub and spoke model to a distributed mesh model, even though the beacons themselves aren't meshing. The proxies are the ones doing the heavy lifting over Wi-Fi.
So, let's recap for Daniel. For the speaker, get a powered speaker that doesn't sleep, use your high-gain adapter, and look into the BlueZ settings in your Proxmox host to ensure the pass-through is stable. For the beacons, don't worry about pairing them. Just get some ESP32 boards, set them up as Bluetooth proxies in ESPA foam, and use the Bermuda integration to track everything.
Spot on. And I would add one more thing for the possibilities part of his question. Bluetooth in the smart home isn't just for tracking and audio anymore. There is a whole world of passive data collection. I have these tiny Xiaomi temperature and humidity sensors all over my house. They are about $5 each, and the batteries last for a year. They just broadcast their data via BLE. No pairing, no Zigbee coordinator needed. My Bluetooth proxies just pick up the data as it floats through the air.
It really is the most frictionless way to add sensors. You just pull the battery tab and the data appears in your dashboard. No inclusion mode, no holding down buttons for 10 seconds.
It is. And for the real power users, there is something coming down the pipeline called Bluetooth channel sounding. It is part of the Bluetooth 6.0 specification that was finalized recently. It is going to allow for centimeter accurate distance measurement without needing the expensive ultra-wideband chips.
So in a year or two, Daniel won't be playing hot or cold with a signal strength gauge. His Home Assistant will be able to tell him, your label printer is exactly 2.3 meters away, under that pile of mail, at an elevation of 40 centimeters.
That is the dream, and the hardware for it is already starting to hit the market. It is a great time to be a Bluetooth enthusiast. We are finally moving past the Bluetooth is flaky era and into the Bluetooth is a precision tool era.
It really is. I think we have given Daniel a lot to chew on here. It is funny how we started with Bluetooth is the messy middle child and ended with it might be the most versatile tool in your kit.
It usually goes that way once you dig past the surface. Bluetooth's biggest problem has always been its reputation for being finicky, but with the modern tools we have in the Home Assistant ecosystem, we are finally at a point where you can make it robust. It just takes a little bit of architectural thinking.
Well, I am definitely inspired to go buy a pack of those cheap beacons now. I have a certain brother who is always losing his glasses, and I think a BLE beacon might be the answer.
Hey, I resemble that remark. But you were probably right. Just make sure the beacon is small enough to fit on the frame without making me look like a cyborg.
We will see. Anyway, I think that covers the core of Daniel's prompt. It is a fascinating look at how a protocol we take for granted can be pushed into some really cool directions.
Absolutely. It is all about using the right tool for the right job, and sometimes the right tool is a $3 chip from halfway across the world.
Well said, Herman. And to all of you listening, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the world of Bluetooth. We hope this gave you some ideas for your own smart home setups. If you are finding these discussions helpful or interesting, we would really appreciate it if you could take a moment to leave us a review on your podcast app of choice.
Yeah, whether it is Spotify or Apple Podcasts, those ratings and reviews really do help other people find the show. It makes a big difference for us, especially as we try to grow this community of weird prompters.
It really does. And remember, you can find all our past episodes, including our deep dives into Zigbee and LoRa, at myweirdprompts.com. We have an RSS feed there for subscribers, and a contact form if you want to send us your own weird prompts. You can also reach us directly at show@myweirdprompts.com.
We love hearing from you guys. The prompts are what make this show what it is. We are just the guys in the living room talking about them.
Exactly. Well, that is it for today. Thanks for listening to my weird prompts. I am Corn.
And I am Herman Poppleberry.
We will see you next time. Goodbye.
Goodbye, everyone.
So, let's talk about this persistent audio thing a bit more, Herman. You mentioned BlueZ and PipeWire. For someone like Daniel who is running Home Assistant OS, is there a specific add-on he should be looking at, or is it all handled natively now?
That is a great question. In the current version of Home Assistant OS, the Bluetooth stack is actually quite robust and integrated directly into the core. You don't necessarily need a separate add-on anymore. When you plug in a supported Bluetooth dongle, Home Assistant should automatically discover it and offer to set up the Bluetooth integration. Once that is done, any discoverable devices nearby will start popping up in the UI.
But the audio part is still a bit different from, say, a Bluetooth temperature sensor, right? Because you need a media player entity that can actually stream data.
Right. For audio, you typically want to use the Bluetooth audio integration, which creates a media player entity for each paired speaker. The challenge Daniel might face is that Home Assistant's internal media player is somewhat basic. If he wants to do multi-room audio or more complex routing, he might want to look into something like Music Assistant.
Oh, Music Assistant is fantastic. We should probably mention that for Daniel. It is a custom integration that basically acts as a supercharged music engine for Home Assistant. It handles things like crossfading, volume normalization, and, crucially, it is much better at managing connections to various types of players, including Bluetooth syncs.
Exactly. Music Assistant can keep a connection warm or attempt to reconnect much more aggressively than the core media player. If Daniel uses Music Assistant, he can treat his Bluetooth speaker almost like a Sonos or a Chromecast. It just shows up as a target for his music. It handles the underlying repairing logic much more gracefully.
And what about the latency? If he is watching a video on a tablet and wants the audio to come out of the Home Assistant speaker via Bluetooth, is he going to run into that classic Bluetooth lag?
Almost certainly. Bluetooth audio latency is a persistent issue, especially with older codecs like SBC. Unless both the transmitter, the USB dongle, and the receiver, the speaker support something like aptX low latency or the newer LE audio standards, there is usually a delay of 100 to 200 milliseconds. For music or announcements, it doesn't matter. For video, it's maddening to watch someone's lips move and hear the sound a split second later.
So for Daniel's use case, which sounds like it might be for announcements or background music, it's perfect. But for a home theater setup, maybe stick to wires or a dedicated low latency protocol like WiseA.
Exactly. Use the right tool. For a voice, for your smart home, having Home Assistant say the front door is open through a Bluetooth speaker in the hallway, the latency is irrelevant. You won't notice a 200 millisecond delay on a voice announcement.
That makes sense. Now, back to the beacons for a second. Daniel mentioned he's using a long-range adapter. Does that help with the beacons too, or is it mostly for the two-way communication with the speaker?
It helps with both, but in different ways. For the speaker, it provides a more stable, high-bandwidth link with less interference. For the beacons, it increases the sensitivity of the receiver. A long-range adapter with a good external antenna can hear the faint whispers of a beacon from much further away than the tiny internal antenna in a Raspberry Pi or a Nuke.
So he might be able to cover his whole house with just that one adapter, if his house isn't too big.
Possibly, but he'll still run into the room-level problem we discussed. He'll know the keys are somewhere, but not where. That's why the distributed proxy approach is so much better. You can use the cheap internal Bluetooth on an ESP32 for the local ears and keep the long-range adapter for the main connection to the speaker.
It's like having one person with a megaphone, the long-range adapter, and a bunch of people with hearing aids scattered around the house. The proxies.
That is a perfect analogy. The megaphone is for talking to the speaker, and the hearing aids are for listening to the beacons.
I like that. It makes the whole system feel very organic, and it really highlights why Daniel's choice of a long-range adapter was a good first step, even if he ends up adding more components later. It gives him a strong anchor for the system.
Absolutely. It gives him a solid foundation. And since he's already using Proxmox and pass-through, he's clearly comfortable with the technical side of things. He's in a great position to build a really sophisticated tracking system. One thing I should mention for Proxmox users, though, make sure you are passing through the entire USB port, not just the device ID. If the device ID changes during a reboot, the pass-through can break.
Good tip. I've been bitten by that one before. I'm also curious about the interference aspect. We live in a world where 2.4 gigahertz is just crowded. We have Wi-Fi, Zigbee, Bluetooth, microwaves, baby monitors. Does having a long-range Bluetooth antenna actually make the interference problem worse because it's picking up more noise from the neighbors?
It can. That is the double-edged sword of high-gain antennas. They don't just pick up more of the signal you want, they pick up more of the noise you don't want. This is why placement is so important. If Daniel puts his Home Assistant server right next to his Wi-Fi router, that long-range Bluetooth adapter is going to be deafened by the Wi-Fi signal. It is like trying to hear a whisper while someone is screaming in your ear.
So the best practice would be to use a USB extension cable to get the Bluetooth dongle away from the server and the router.
Always. I tell everyone, if you have a USB dongle for Zigbee or Bluetooth, buy a 2-meter extension cable. It is the cheapest and most effective upgrade you can make. It gets the radio away from the electromagnetic interference generated by the computer's processor, the power supply, and the USB 3.0 ports themselves, which are notoriously noisy in the 2.4 gigahertz range.
It's funny how often the solution to high-tech problems is a simple piece of wire.
Isn't it? We spend all this time worrying about codecs and protocols and hypervisors, and sometimes the answer is just move the antenna 3 feet to the left.
Truly. Well, I think we have really explored every nook and cranny of this one. Daniel, if you are listening, we expect an update on how the label printer tracking is going. We want to know if you actually found it.
Yes, please. And maybe a photo of the long-range antenna setup. I always love seeing how people mount those things, whether they are taped to a bookshelf or mounted properly on a wall.
Me too. Alright, let's actually wrap it up this time. I need to go see if I can find where I left my own label printer.
Sounds good. I'll go check the signal strength on my glasses.
Thanks again for listening, everyone. This has been my Weird Prompts. We will catch you in the next episode.
Take care, everyone. Happy automating.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.
This episode was generated using Gemini Flash 3. Text-to-speech engine was Chatterbox.
Thanks for listening to another episode of My Weird Prompts, an AI-generated podcast featuring Daniel Rosehill's AI prompts, as answered by a revolving cast of friendly AI characters including me, Cornelius the Sloth. Subscribe on Spotify or visit myweirdprompts.com.